I'd like to call the public safety meeting to order, please. All members are present. Can I get approval of our last meeting minutes, please?
I'll make
Motion to approve. Second.
All right, a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? All right, thank you. We do have one old piece on our agenda, and we have one new piece on our agenda. And our old piece, I'll see if Councilman Neal would like to move forward with this piece. Councilman?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, sir. At this time, I would like to move forward. I believe everyone has received the correspondence regarding the resolution from members outside the community. Last night, I forwarded an email from Mr. Cozart, who represents the police union, that expressed his opinion or concerns, as well as I forwarded an email from Bishop Joey Johnson, who's leading the city's racial equity task force, a letter from Mr. Steve Millett, who's with the Chamber of Commerce. And then I forwarded one from the president of our school board, who's also the equity officer for leads diversity at Kent State University. And I think his is important because he's on the legislative side of the school board, where they've already moved to move a equity policy within the school board and are forming a baseline understanding between the union and the administration and teachers and staff there. So they're a little bit further ahead than what we are. But I sent those so that one, this body could see how what we're talking about on the legislative side is being looked at by our community partners in the corporate sector, how it's embraced by the leader of our racial equity task force, and those who know Bishop Johnson, he's been educating our community on implicit and explicit bias for years, long before the Brookings Institute came out. And all those letters speak to the need for everything starts with conversation so that we can have an understanding. And that's all this resolution calls for. There's no way for us to legislate equitable policy if all 13 members of council have a different definition. There's no way for us to support an equitable plan. We've been presented with an update of the Racial Equity Task Force. If we don't have a baseline understanding on what equity means, and in talking to members of the community, that's been one of the challenges with a lot of the even DEI initiatives that are taking place and members that are serving on those committees, is that there isn't a baseline understanding of what equity means. So everyone's coming in with a different level of understanding of this work and where we are. And so again, what this resolution calls for is just for us to come and create that baseline understanding. The last time I had a chance to speak before this committee, I tried to give an example of, Mr. Chairman, when I asked you about the word all. All is a pretty simple definition. We can ask our children, if we say all, it means all. Most of us can understand that. But yet I use that because written within the great documents of this country are the words, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. But yet we are still trying to live that out and understand what that means. And we have debates within the chambers of our local communities, our state communities, and within the chambers of nationally, as we live out this great experiment. So having this understanding, and we have an opportunity to be in front of this, as we've committed great human resources and dollars to having a discussion about racial equity and what equity means. We've partnered with the chamber to create a department to bring equity, balance of equity and understanding of what equity means within our corporate community. And as I said, those within our schools, and if you see what's happening across this nation with discussion about critical race theory and the misunderstanding of what all that means, it is our charge as leaders of the legislative process to do set the groundwork for reasonable discussion. And it starts with having a common understanding of whatever it is we talk about. We're using equity as council. We've reached out and said, wait a minute, we're supposed to have a collaborative discussion about the budget. So understanding, using words and having a proper understanding of what those words mean are critical. But again, I go back to this resolution calls for a common discussion to create a common understanding to something that we as a city, if you look at the letter from the chamber, it speaks to the great investment that the city has made in equitable measures. If you read Bishop Johnson's letter, who's leading our racial equity task force, he speaks to, it starts with a conversation. So having had the opportunity to have all those who wanted comment to be able to speak, I ask that, you know, this body now takes time to discuss it, the points of opinion, and then so we can move forward. Because as I had a chance to speak with one of my colleagues, some of you may not see this as this, but I see this moment in history as just as important as those who sat in chambers and had the discussion about Brown versus the Board of Education. This is just as critical a discussion that we're having right now, because it determines the opportunity for everyone to embrace the full opportunities of what our cities and communities have to offer. So, you know, I'm just thankful for such a time as this, that we sit in the seats that we sit and have the position to serve our community and lead in such a way. So with that, Brother Chairman, I do ask that the committee deliberate, discuss, and express so that we can move forward.
Thank you, Councilman. I'll see if there's any committee members of public safety first, see if they have any comments or questions. I do not see any. Any other council members? I do see Councilwoman Mosley.
Thank you, Chairman Kamer. Just rising in support of this resolution. And I just want to publicly thank Councilman Neal for doing the due diligence and taking the time and going and reaching into those community partners and getting their take on this topic and this important issue that we face here, not just in our community, but across this country, and how impactful that letter from the chamber. If the council body has not read that letter, I think they should read it. Not to take away from Bishop Johnson's letter, who's been fighting this fight with us for quite some time, and Dr. Akbar, but the chamber, who is walking side by side with us, that letter is very impactful. So I thank you for taking the time to do the research and talking to those individuals who see this being a much needed process that we need here for our city.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Anyone else? All right, I don't see anybody else. Council President Margot Somerville.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. I think that diversity and inclusion is really conversations that we definitely have to have. We have to keep that on the top of our mindset with all that we do. But I do want to just ask the question, because again, Councilman Neal spoke to the process of being collaborative. And what I would like to see is that we bring unions collectively to the table and collaboratively work with them so that we can create what this looks like versus, you know, basically telling them what it should look like, but bring everybody to the table so that we can begin these conversations of how collaboratively we can come up with this process.
Councilman, you want to respond, or we okay?
Yes. No, sir. That's what this resolution calls for. It does not tell anyone how to do anything. What it calls for is for all bodies to come together and discuss. What are the policies and practices that you use right now? If you see in my reply to Mr. Kozart, and we've had much discussion, I said, Mr. Cozart, what is the union's definition of equity? And what are the metrics that they use to determine if their policies and practices are equitable? It's so that we can have an understanding, because right now there isn't one. So this resolution doesn't tell anybody what to do or how to do it. What it says is let us come together and reason with one another and have a common understanding of what we mean when we say equity and what metrics we use. Because even amongst the 13 members of council, I've asked this before, if I was to ask, what is council's definition of equity? We'd probably, if we don't get 13 different answers, we come pretty close. And then if I said, what is our metric? What is it that we use to make sure that we implement equitable policy? Please tell me what metrics we use. We come up with different things. It's not saying, well, we're going to have 20% of business going. Well, that's a start, but what is that 20%? Is it 20% all going to the same company? No, I mean, you have to have metrics. And the beautiful thing is that we have community partners that have done some of the work that we can work with, looking at their tools, so that we could come to a common understanding. So this resolution doesn't tell anybody how to do anything. It says, come, let us reason together, share how we're doing it, and create a baseline understanding amongst everyone.
Thanks, Councilman. Councilwoman Amobian.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I certainly support this, particularly at this time when we are talking about the task force that Bishop Johnson is chairing, the resources that are available to us to distribute amongst our city and the citizens in our city. We need to have some way of looking at how are we doing in terms of dispersing these resources? How are we doing in terms of addressing all areas of our city, making sure that we are meeting the needs of the citizens? It doesn't mean that you treat everybody the same. I know people tend to talk about that, but you don't treat everybody the same because everybody doesn't need the same thing. So I certainly agree that this would be a wonderful opportunity for us all to sit down and talk about what would we like to see if we want to treat our citizens and our city in an equitable way. What are we talking about? Because wards 3, 4, 5, and others don't need the same thing and amount of resources or whatever that 1, 8, and 7, 6 all need. We need different kinds of things to meet the needs of the citizens. So this would be a great opportunity for us to all agree on what we'd like to see and what we consider to be our definition of this whole process. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Council President Somerville.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. Thank you so much, Councilman Neal, for clarifying what you intended by this piece. I'm just wondering, is a resolution necessary for us to begin to have these conversations? That's my only question.
May I, Mr. Chair?
Yes, please.
Yeah, since council only operates through resolutions and ordinances, yes, sir, it is essential. This is how we put our stamp on leading. We document in history. When people come back and look at this time in history to see what did Akron City Council do, and this whole discussion about equity and all that was going on, this is how it's documented. We operate through ordinances and resolutions. And an ordinance would be dictating how we do this process. A resolution is urging, asking again that we come together and respect the humanity of all and have this discussion. I mean, look, I said this before, I understand those who are in this work have a better ability to understand that this is deeper than just talking about race. You know, I was sharing with one member of council, the reason why I'm so passionate about this, because when I was born, I couldn't even vote if I was of age when I was born. And I'm still a young man. I was not, my people didn't have full access. And because of the civil rights movement, not just did my family and my people progress, but white women had access to more things. The gay community had access to, because it opened up the eyes to the humanity of everybody. And we were able to have those discussions. So this, I know some people struggle with this because they think it's just about race, but it's so much deeper. When we talk about being equitable. And so, you know, I use the term that the great experiment. You know, the question was, could democracy ever really succeed? Could people actually exercise their free will? We're blessed to live in a country that allows us to do that. But you know what? The struggle comes in us having these kind of discussions as we evolve. And so, again, I asked council not to run from this opportunity to lead, but to lean into it. If we put money into creating a racial equity task force, if under the leadership of the administration, we put money into creating a chamber that's looking at equity within our corporate community, let's join them and do our part and share and coming together so that we have a common understanding of what we mean when we discuss equity, so that we can move this community forward. Like I said, I don't need to tell you, if you've been looking at what's happening on the national realm, communities are being polarized because of misunderstanding.
Thank you, Councilman. Anyone else? All right. Before we ask for a vote, and I'm going to have Sarah read in the resolution before we vote, I'll make my statement. I have been in contact with the 4 unions over the last few months, a few of them more than others. My understanding, and I don't want to speak for them, that they're willing to take part in training with the administration. They want to move forward. They just don't think a resolution is the route to go. That's my understanding with the conversations I've had with the 4 unions. So moving forward, I'm hoping the administration and we as council and the 4 unions will have those discussions. But right here during committee, I will support the resolution for a favorable vote to move it to council as a whole. But this evening, I will vote against the resolution. So if there's nothing else come before us, I'll ask Sarah to read it in for the record, and then we'll ask for a vote.
Sure. The resolution calling upon FOP Union Lodge Number 7, Akron Firefighters Association Local 330, AFSCME 1360, CSPA, collectively the unions, Akron City Council, the administration of the Akron Municipal Court, and the administration of the City of Akron to engage in discussions leading to racial equity training to promote governing in a more equitable manner, thereby promoting the growth and success of the city and declaring an emergency.
Thank you, Sarah. I'll ask the committee, is there a motion?
I'll make that motion for a favorable report with suspension of the rules.
Thank you.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? All right, thank you. We'll present that this evening. Moving on to our new piece. It's a resolution offered by Councilwoman Omobian, Councilman Kamer, Councilman Malik, Councilwoman Holland, Councilman Neal, and Councilwoman Mosley. Acknowledging Akron Police Officer Will Culver and thanking him for his off-duty assistance in apprehending a person suspected of multiple break-ins in the city of Akron and declaring an emergency. And I will turn this over to Councilwoman Omobian because she's the one that worked on this and brought this to our attention. And thank you for allowing me to co-sponsor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I think all of us who heard about and read about what this officer did, we were all just so appreciative and would thank him just the idea that somebody would be up at 3 o'clock in the morning with the presence of mind after hearing something that was disturbing, would take off after someone, risking his own safety and doing what police officers probably do day in and day out. I was just really blown away, and I think this deserves special recognition, just to acknowledge that he ignored self-preservation and looked out for himself and his fellow man in his community to protect the community after hearing all of these annoying things that this person has been doing. But I feel for his wife, because I can imagine she was probably in a state of fear. Her husband running outside at 3 o'clock in the morning after someone, not knowing if this person had a deadly weapon or not. It's the kind of work that officers are trained to do. And it's probably the thing that he'll say that, we all do this day in and day out. I don't know if he's present. I know that we requested his presence, and he is probably just thinking that, oh, this is nothing out of the ordinary. And I think is extremely extraordinary and deserves special recognition. I just want to thank him for doing this. And I'm sure the neighbors all thank him very much as well. So thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
No, thank you, Councilwoman. And our office did reach out to him. He was not able to make it, but I do see Chief Milet is on, and I want to put him on the spot, but just in case he has a few words, he's more than welcome to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Excuse me. I want to thank this committee and the entire council for acknowledging Officer Culver. Yes, he is tied up with his family today. He's taken some well-deserved time off and spending some quality time with his family. But I can tell you that the acknowledgement of this body for the work that of this officer and other officers goes a long way in communicating your support for them and the role that they play in our community, in our society. Again, I want to, on behalf of the men and women of the police department and specifically Officer Culver, I again want to thank you for acknowledging his efforts in taking this individual into custody and bringing that person to justice, because my understanding is this individual, the suspect, was victimizing many people up in that neighborhood. And we have at least made that neighborhood just a little bit safer. Officer Culver has by his action. So again, I want to thank you for acknowledging his work.
Thank you, Chief. I appreciate you being able to speak. Any other sponsors would like to speak? I'll look at we do have Councilwoman Holland.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Chief Milet. On behalf of the people of Ward 1, of which Officer Culver and his family are residents and neighbors, I'm just so grateful that this is an officer who in the dead of night certainly stepped out of his lane, even though this is his professional training and his natural response, that he took it upon himself to behave in the maximal neighborly way, to keep the neighborhood safer. I know that I speak for many when I say we're all sleeping a little better at night. This was an ongoing worry. Social media has been alive with reports about this individual who's since been apprehended. And I just want to say that from the bottom of my heart that I believe Officer Culver represents the best of us, that when we go that extra mile and step out of our comfort zone to be good neighbors and to look out for each other and to do the next right thing, as he most certainly did, that we really contribute to making the city of Akron the very best it could be. I'm so grateful for APD and for you, Chief, and for all the men and women who served. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Councilwoman. I appreciate those comments. We have a list of speakers here. Councilman Malik, next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Want to echo the sentiments of my colleagues. This individual who was apprehended was also targeting homes in Ward 8. And like Councilwoman Holland, most days I would check Nextdoor the first thing every morning and see a long list of comments of folks whose houses had been, impacted. It's a scary thing when you have footage of someone trying to open your Mac window at 2 a.m. and then seeing this happen brazenly almost every night. And really, especially with social media, people are getting very worked up. And I think there was also a fear that, someone was gonna, that it could be a violent encounter, or that, someone would be targeted. There could be some mistaken identity and things like that. And so really appreciative of what Officer Culver did, and like Councilman Holland said, stepping outside of, beyond his regular duty. But I also want to, reflect on the fact that I think so often our officers, this was an issue of very high public attention, but often our officers are going beyond their duty, beyond their expectations on things that we don't see, on things that there will never be cameras on. And, I wish that we could have commendations for every one of those things, large and small. And so I think, it's wholly appropriate here. And I think we should try to lift up those stories wherever we can. So thank you, Chief Milet. Thank you, Officer Culver.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilman Neal, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just join everyone in saying thank you. But I want to say an extra thanks for when officers have a choice to live wherever they want to live, for staying in and living in Akron. What a benefit to have someone that works here, that serves here, because if, like so many that have choices, he had chose to live in Green or Copley or some other community, that person may still be out terrorizing neighborhoods. But because he loved the community enough to even stay here and live here, we had that extra benefit. So like those teachers that choose to stay here, the officers, the firefighters, thank you. This is no condemnation to those who choose to live somewhere else, but just thank you for staying and being a neighbor. Because if you had not made that choice, you wouldn't have been there to do what you did. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Good comments. I don't see anybody else. So I'll see what's the wishes of the committee. Go ahead.
Motion for suspension of the rules with a favorable report.
I'll second that. So we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Anybody opposed? All right. Thank you, everyone. We'll pass that this evening. And thank you, Chief, for all the work so far. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
With that, we're adjourned.
Our next committee of the day will be the Budget and Finance Committee, and that will begin at 3 o'clock. Those committee members are Freeman, Amobian, Malik, Baylor, and Lombardo. Again, that will begin at 3 o'clock. So we will stop the live stream and be back at 3.